Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in just about 1 minute, as you can see. Welcome. Come on in. Hello, welcome everyone to the June bonus ALVE Academy. I'm very excited to have this presentation today. It was standing room only, and even more so at Points of Light last week when we presented. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy, our host for today. Go ahead.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm sorry. I just had a kick you out of Zoom moment. So off to a little bit of a silly start this morning. So excited that you could all join us for our live academy today. This is our bonus academy where we're talking about career pathways for volunteer engagement professionals. So we will get started. Just a couple of housekeeping items. You are all on mute. We are planning to use the chat or Q&A section for questions. We are dedicating some time at the end for questions, and we'll be mindful of that time frame as we move through. We are recording the session as well, and we'll place the slide deck on ALVE on the member side right after in just a few days. A few announcements. Our July ALVE Academy is on the 25th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We're talking about market research for recruitment and communication strategies. We also announced in our newsletter that the ALVE Impact Award nominations are going to be opening on July 1st. So we hope you will join us in recognizing emerging and exemplary leaders in our field by nominating someone by August 15th. We also have announced the speakers for the Volunteer Managers Hybrid Conference. The dates on that are October 22nd or 23rd. The host site registration is now open and individual attendee registration opens on July 1st. So lots of exciting things coming. But let's get right into it. So today we have two presenters, Kathy Toma, who is our ALVE board president, and then Megan Bixie, who's a certified executive coach and past president of ALVE. So we are so excited to have you join us. I will stop my sharing so that you can share.
Well, great. Welcome, everyone. I don't know, Kathy, if you want to do any additional introductions of yourself before we get started.
I would say, besides being ALVE president, my day job is as director of volunteer resources for Hammer and NER. I'm in the Twin Cities, and we support individuals with developmental disabilities in group homes and apartment programs. So thank you for having me.
Great. And I'm Megan Bixie. I'm also a past president of ALVE and past board member. And I currently work for a public agency down in Southern California, providing health and wellness services. I oversee volunteer services, but I also am responsible for HR functions, which include kind of the benefits and compensation side. So Kathy and I have worked together on this project. She'll tell you a little bit more about it. But before we get started with that, we just kind of wanted to get a pulse on who's in the room today. So hopefully you took the poll that we put in the chat here. If you hadn't done it yet, here's one more time. You can get in right now if you click on it. But we're just going to share just really quickly so you can kind of see who's in the room with us today. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. And so we asked you all just right now who have participated in the Career Pathway Survey. And so About a third of you did that. So that's great. So you'll be a little bit familiar with what we had asked and what we were kind of focused on, but we'll go over that a little bit more. And then we also just kind of wanted to see where everybody was located because we know that we did some salary survey information. And so we wanted to just check like where, everyone's in the room. Looks like we've got a lot of East Coasters that are here today. So that's great. And we'll kind of show you what we saw in the survey for the respondents that participated. And then we wanted to get an idea of what title best represents what your current role is at your organization. So it looks like the majority of us are in that coordinator, management level space. So that's awesome as well. So we'll try to focus a little bit more on those results and examples there as well. And we did kind of see that too in the survey, that those kind of being the popular titles that we saw come across. And then just lastly, we wanted to see what career level you're all at. So we've got a lot of folks here in mid-level, and you can kind of see that color coded by what you said was your job title. So with mid-level, a lot of you are kind of seeing it as many of your job titles there. And I think with career level, people usually think the length of time that they've spent in their career. And we'll kind of show you it's a little bit different when it comes to the survey information. So that way we can kind of create, this job leveling document that will hopefully help you see the career progression for this field. So with that, because that is the end of our just little quick pulse so we can see where everyone's at. I'm going to stop sharing there. And then I am going to pull up our slides, and I will then kick it off to Kathy, who will then take us from there.
Hi, everyone again. I'm going to apologize up front. I'm about 3 weeks out from a cold and still have a cough, so I may have to take a break occasionally, but we should be good for now. Welcome to our presentation of career pathways for the volunteer engagement professional. Why did ALVE do this survey? We wanted to create a job leveling document showing the career progression and competencies needed for a volunteer engagement professional. And we did that by hiring a compensation consultant from Creative Management Solutions, who helped us develop the survey, conducted it in April, and then helped us compile all the information and do the analysis, which you're about to see. All right, next slide. So we had 3 reasons that we want to be able to use this data for. One is for your organizations and any organization to help them to determine the right level and job title to use for job responsibilities necessary for the volunteer engagement role. To show some career progression and growth for volunteer engagement roles, and also to help provide training and development opportunities for volunteer engagement professionals. We also wanted the data to help you as a professional, to help you understand the various levels and progression for volunteer engagement professionals, to help you recognize the competencies necessary for each job level and job title, and to help you develop a career plan for growing future competencies in order to move into larger volunteer engagement roles. And finally, the third reason is that we're going to use all the data to advocate for our profession to get our own occupation code with the Department of Labor. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go. Now we want to take a look at our survey demographics. Who took the survey? And we're going to move on to the map, just like the one you took with this Mentimeter. The Mentimeter, we can see that we had pretty good representation. The largest group that participated were up in the Atlantic region, followed by the Great Lakes, then Pacific. But we did manage to get it across the United States. Then we can show you the organizations that participated in the survey. The largest group, which shouldn't be a surprise, was the nonprofit organizations, followed by government employees, and then for-profit. Interestingly, when we looked at the revenue of an organization, the largest amount was over 50 million, then followed by 500K to 2 million. So kind of a gap between the types of organizations, but that's who participated. And then if we look at the industry type, where you came from if you took this, the largest group at 30% was through social services, disabilities, hunger, and homelessness, followed by health, mental health and wellness, and so forth. If we look at you as an individual who took this, probably no surprise, the largest percent were people who self-identified as female, followed by male, non-binary, and those who did not want to answer. If we look at ethnicity, the largest was a white, followed by Black or African American, Hispanic or Latino, Asian or Asian American, American Indian or Alaskan, and Native American, so forth. For looking at certification, we wanted to see what kind of training people had. So we asked, and 34% were certified in volunteer administration, so CVAs. And then the next, actually the largest amount had no certification. We asked this because we know that many people have more than one hat. And to take the survey, you needed to have at least 20% of your role being volunteer management, but you might have HR as part of that, or you might work in development. And as you can see, there's other types of certifications you can have, and especially as you move up in the levels of volunteer engagement. Education, the majority had bachelor's, followed by master's and some doctorates. And then the majority of people who took the survey were mid-level, much of who's here now on this presentation, followed by senior level management. So that's who took the survey. And now we're going to move on to what did we find based on the survey. So we're going to take a look at the career levels and job titles. And if we look at it as a pyramid and start at the bottom, that's your entry level, who is an associate, an assistant, or an intern, followed by the early career level, which is often categorized as a specialist. Mid-career level, you could be a supervisor or coordinator, and then on to your senior level as a senior manager, and finally the executive level, which is the top executive, senior director, or director. When we looked at the job sizing criteria, we looked at a few different things to help analyze this. And the top one was, again, looking at your job level or job title, which is on the left-hand side. And then we looked at the independence of action. Are you autonomous, or do you have to take a lot of direction? Followed by the type of direction, the type of experience that you have to have that level or job title, and finally your education and certification. So if we look at mid-career level, which is the coordinator or supervisor, you're doing a lot. You're explaining to others, you're following procedures. As a supervisor, you're interpreting the standards, and you have general supervision, but you know what you're doing the work. And typically you're going from a non-exempt to an exempt position. BS or BA is desirable, and you're probably looking at trying to get your CVA. You've had enough experience where you're looking at taking that test. If we look a little higher into the executive level, you can see that they're creating systems and paradigms as a senior director. You're following policy, but you have a lot of independence. You're probably at 8 years or higher in experience, and you're looking at not only having a bachelor's, but maybe a master's and 1 or 2 certifications as well. That's an example of the different levels and what we're looking at for the criteria. If we look at our competencies, we came up with 9 competencies and duties of framework. So no matter where you are on the pyramid or whatever level you are, you're going to be working somewhere in these 9 competencies and duties. And if we look at the top right, everyone here is going to somehow be involved with recruitment, recognition and retention, program coordination, training, program design and development, database management and record keeping, communication, and volunteer program administration. How hands-on you are will depend on your level. And if you're doing strategy, that will also depend on your level as well. So we're going to take an example, and it's really great because we're going to look at the coordinator, which many of you are, and we're going to look at those competencies and duties for a coordinator. So in the middle of the circle, again, is the job position, and you see the 9 different competencies, again, recruitment, recognition, and so forth. At the very top in the little blue boxes, we're saying, who does that coordinator report to? It's a supervisor or manager. Type of direction, they have general supervision. And at a coordinator level, you're probably 4+ years, non-exempt, and you're doing program execution. And considered a bachelor's is desirable. And again, progression towards your CVA. If we take a look at the left, there's the dots there represent examples of each of the 9 competencies and duties framework. So if we look at recruitment and we look at the top right, recruitment involves, for the coordinator, growing the number of people attending events, recruiting and onboarding incoming volunteers. For recognition and retention, you're creating large-scale appreciation events, activities, and opportunities for volunteers, such as annual dinners, National Volunteer Week, social media campaigns. So I won't read them all out to you, but you can see that the dots are coordinated to the 9 different competencies and duties. And that, again, is for the coordinator. Now we'll move on to what a manager would look like and their competencies and duties. Again, the same 9, but this time the manager is reporting to the director or senior director. They have limited supervision, more autonomy, probably 5 years experience, and they are maybe exempt at this point and are likely required to have a bachelor's and are CVA certified. Again, if we look at recruitment, this is where the managers evaluating, they're probably supervising others. And so they're evaluating the employees for fit and qualification. And they're evaluating the effectiveness of volunteer placements. For recognition, they're planning and ensuring execution of development, implementation, and maintenance of volunteer recognition plans. And program coordination, they're directing and implementing the program, process, product improvements, and they manage volunteer committees. And as you go around, you can see there's examples for each. Now, I know in a perfect world, you would have an assistant, a coordinator, a manager, a director, an executive director, but we know not all organizations have that. And in fact, you may be doing a multitude of these things that would be equivalent of a director down to a coordinator. And we're hoping that by promoting this information, we can make some changes for you at your organizations. We're going to take a larger look at one of the competencies and duties, which is recruitment. And we're again going to look at what it looks like for an intern up to the top executive. So on the left, we have an intern, they're coming in, they're entering information, they're tracking information. An assistant will probably advertise, enlist, explain work and procedures. They're going on the websites and they're advertising for roles. A specialist will screen candidates, complete onboarding, A coordinator will grow volunteer candidate pool, onboard all the incoming volunteers. The supervisor coordinates the process for recruitment, screening, and onboarding. Manager will evaluate employees for the fit for the job because they're supervising, and again, evaluates the effectiveness of volunteer placements. Senior manager determines the advertising and referral sources and representation. They engage in public speaking. They participate in final candidate interviews. The director will project staffing requirements needed in order to work the program. They'll determine cross-training for staff and volunteers, oversee internal and external sources for candidates. A senior director evaluates recruiting effectiveness by type of program and need, staffing levels and skill requirements given programs, and they're really working on the budget for the program. And finally, the top executive determines the business strategy for recruiting, including competencies, deployment, and attraction and retention tactics to fulfill long-term strategy needs. And as I said before, you may be in a position where you're doing something of all of these different categories. If we, so that's looking at the competencies, job levels, and job titles. And I now know you're probably really excited to move on to the salary ranges. And with that, I'm handing it over to Megan.
Thank you, Kathy. And I did want, there was some conversation in the chat, and I wanted to just go a little bit back to this about, you know, some of you, like when your organization is hiring kind of the first step role for volunteer engagement, it's a coordinator. And my organization was similar when I started here. And just, it doesn't necessarily mean that a coordinator is an entry level position. It may just be the entry point for your organization of what your organization needs. So for example, and many of you might even be a department of one. So you are the volunteer coordinator, and you do all of it, right, for the organization. So if you think of it maybe like from the human resources perspective, a lot of organizations also may only have like one person that does HR, and they may be HR coordinator or generalist. It's typically like an HR generalist that's going to do all the HR kind of functions. What this career pathways demonstrates is that there's a variety of jobs that are available in volunteer engagement, but at all different skill levels. So even on this job sizing criteria, it kind of gives you an idea of really what level experience, autonomy each of these positions have. So say if like an organization only had a volunteer engagement assistant, they can't really expect an assistant to be able to do some of the higher level functions that Kathy showed on the competency side for, say, a coordinator or manager, right? So what we're hoping to do with this information, and it's on the website, which we've created a job leveling document that goes through some of these things for each of those job titles that we gave. So that way you can really see the progression of the higher level skills that you're going to need within each competency based on what that job title is. And then we've kind of grouped them in those career levels. So even though maybe your first stop is a coordinator at your organization, that's not necessarily entry level in the field, right? It's really more in the mid-level, like where you're moving to, right? So we just I kind of wanted to clarify that just a little bit. You'll see it better on the job leveling document if you go on our website, which is a tool that you'll be able to use for this information. And this is an example of what that would look like for each of the competencies. You'll see, and you really pay attention to the first verb that's in each of these bullets. That's really going to give you, you know, where an intern is entering and processing information, but, you know, a senior director is evaluating, you know, effectiveness and using higher level skills, all within the realm of recruitment. So without further ado, because I know everybody wants me to move to the next slide because we're going to talk about salary. As a reminder, what we did is we asked everyone, all 461 participants that filled out the survey for us, what their salary data was. We compared it to, what their title was, where they saw themselves, within the career levels. And so we worked with our compensation consultant. One, he really looked at all these duties that everyone was performing to get a better idea of what was comparable, right? What all skills, all competencies kind of have compensatory value. So he looks at that, he compares it to data that's already nationally available through various surveys that he compared to see, okay, what jobs are similar to these and do these things, and then kind of right sizes it for our field. And so what that helped us create is, based on all of those job titles and the career levels, we're able to give you kind of a salary range more on a national, broader scale. And then we'll talk about how you can kind of use some pay differentials to at least narrow it down a little bit by state. But then it's important to note that with compensation, there's so many factors that go into it. It's not just the duties. It can be your organization type, your organization size when it comes to budget, where, geographically where you are. I mean, we all know, like, I'm in California, and even, California is, LA is different from San Francisco, from, the Inland Empire or way up north, so I think there's those things that you have to kind of consider. So if you really wanted to get more detailed, there's a couple ways you can use this data to do that, as well as really benchmarking against where your own organization is. So we could talk about that. I'm going to press the button now, so you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So this is kind of like a salary range structure. So you can see the jobs that we talked about with the titles, and then you've got your minimum range all the way to your maximum range, and then your range midpoint, right? It's kind of an average salary that you may find in the field. This is based on if an organization had about a $10 million budget. So give or take, if your organization is smaller than that, you're going to go more towards the range minimum. If it's a larger organization, you may go more towards the range maximum as maybe your average salary. But this just provides you kind of a broad range. Now, this isn't true. So this isn't true for all of us, right? It's really going to depend on all the factors that I said, but it just gives you kind of an idea. So this moves you from the very, very entry level all the way up to top executive. That means executive director or CEO or whoever's reporting to the board of directors, to demonstrate that there is progression all the way up to the top position within the organization. Now, these were the most popular titles that everybody kind of submitted. And then we asked you to kind of pick which one mapped closest. And then we also asked what your actual title was to see if we had missed anything. But for the most part, these are the ones that showed up the most. I know, for example, I'm a chief, and chief is not on here, but not a lot of people had necessarily that title, but it could necessarily, be, I asked our consultant, he said it would be somewhat between the senior director and top executive. So there could even be an additional level that's there if it's created, where then you would kind of just average those two areas to get like a middle ground between senior director and top executive. But this really just kind of provides you that structure. If you have different job titles, and this came from Points of Light conference, someone had asked, we call it something different, or should we be calling it these things? And, your organization is going to determine what best fits for them. This gives you a framework. So if people aren't sure, this is a really great tool to be able to say, these are, typical job titles that are found, along with the competencies and duties that are assigned to each of these things. But maybe, Kathy gave example, maybe you call it a volunteer champion, job title at your organization, and that's not on here. You would look at the job leveling document and say, okay, which one of these maps the closest to what a champion does? And then you could say, oh, it's really close to a specialist. So I'm going to look at the specialist competencies and level experience and all the job sizing criteria to get a look at what salary aligns mostly with that. So this just gives you kind of a framework in terms of numbers of what you can find for each of these job titles. The other tool that we provided for you from our compensation consultant was around pay differentials. So we have an Excel file that's on the website as well, where you can take, and I'm just going to kind of flip back and forth a little bit. So you say if we wanted to look at a manager title, and on this salary range, a manager title or a manager is on average 86,000. So if all things are equal, yeah, we're around a $10 million, budget or whatever. I'm going to look at 86,000, and then I'm going to type in 86,285. You'll see it there in the red under the exempt positions. I'm going to type that in. And then as soon as I type it in, all the data in that column where it says adjusted salary is going to change, and it's going to base it off of the pay differential. So if I'm in California, I'm going to see that California is about, 5.17% higher than that salary structure. So therefore, if I'm in California, I'd really be looking more at about a $90,000 average salary there. And so this information, I know someone had asked a question about, okay, well, how are the pay differentials calculated? There's a lot of data, and that's why we hired a consultant to be able to look at national benchmarks, that he was able to benchmark our jobs. And then what he did was he took a job that was very similar, like a program manager, and was able to look at all the same job in each of the states to see what the differential was. So that way he could say like, oh, okay, this same job, it's comparable to volunteer engagement professional, and I see it's 5.17% higher in California that they pay. So he helped to create kind of these differentials for you all to be able to kind of better map it closer to your area. Again, like I said, this doesn't mean this is the salary. It has to be this, right? There's that's why there's ranges, but it just kind of gives you a starting point. We did have a question before too about, well, my organization, like they probably won't pay this. Like that's not what we pay. Again, it's all based typically on organizational budget size. So the best thing that you can do too is use that job leveling document to say, hey, this is what the job does. All those competencies, here's the level of performance that's required. What other job in my organization does this? And I should be paid on the same level as that job. So it really does kind of provide you, yes, you have salary information that can help, but then you also have this other tool. If the salary information is not going to be convincing enough, you use what you already have at your own organization to say, hey, my job as a volunteer engagement manager is very similar to this program manager that's over here. So am I being paid on the same level as that program manager? Right. So it just gives you kind of more tools and information to be able to advocate for that. So we thought it would be interesting, hopefully you do as well, to think about, okay, all of you that actually filled out the survey, what was the actual salary and pay information you provided? And again, this is salary only. And then what was benchmarked in our salary structure from our compensation consultants. So the green is what the participants provided in the survey, and the blue is based on the salary range that we discussed. And then we grouped them by region, similar to that map that we showed you, just to give you a picture of it as well. So you can see here on entry level, these are your assistants, interns, folks that were right in the beginning of their career here. You can see the data is a little bit all over. Some of the rationale around this, and I think it alludes to what was kind of in the chat, was that some people get a title, and even though they get more responsibilities, maybe even more pay, their title didn't change. So they kind of carried it along, and therefore they're still getting compensated more, but they've been in the job a long time. And so they kind of like move up more with their salary, but titling kind of stays the same. So you can kind of see it's a little all over here. If you don't see a green column, it's because we didn't have anyone from that region with that exact job title. So this is just based on the info that we got. If you move on to early level, which is around your specialist kind of space, then you can kind of see again, gets a little bit closer, but you know, our salary structure from our compensation consultant again is lagging a bit. So you can see it very similar to the entry level as well. Now we move into mid-level. It's starting to get a lot closer here. And this is going to be your coordinator and supervisor level. So it's starting to creep up there where now you see the survey findings are a bit above some of those positions, but some are not. So it's a little bit of a mix. Then you see with the senior level, now you're moving into the managers and the senior managers, that it's starting to trail, right? So we're seeing our participant data now trail behind the pay from the salary structure, and then very similar to executive level. I'll put a caveat on the executive level because this does include that top executive salary as well. So, and we did not have a lot of executive directors or CEOs completing the survey. So again, you'll probably see a broader differential here, but it's still pretty much a large differential compared to what you saw on some of the salary information for even a director or senior director role. So you can see at the beginning, you know, we had a lot of pay kind of all over the map, literally, throughout all of the states. People being paid just a variety of different ways. So our hope is that what we've found or providing you can give a little bit more structure or guidance on how you can actually make this career progression and kind of the leveling that you would pay for each of those job titles. So just really quickly, we also had asked more information about the work-life balance practices and training education. That'll be included in our full report, but I thought it was interesting to just include, you know, when we asked you all what training and education is actually provided and supported for by your employer. And a lot of the organizations that participated, over, you know, almost 3/4 of these organizations are providing any dues and membership fees for associations that, you know, like ALVE, that are helping to continue the professionals' development. And then we see, you know, followed pretty closely by, you know, professional licenses like the certification in volunteer administration and, you know, education assistance, providing if individuals want to go back to school, they're able to tap into resources of their organization to help pay for that. So those were kind of the most popular, but really the dues and memberships was the most popular. And then we just asked about work-life balance practices, because it is important to remember that even though we have this salary information and we look at salary and pay, it's very important for our role. There's a lot of trade-offs in organizations, especially in the nonprofit sector, knowing that we're all not going to, even though there may be, you know, I use HR again as an example because I'm responsible for an HR. An HR generalist at a nonprofit is going to be very different from an HR generalist at a for-profit. And so, you know, there's a variety of things that we look at in total compensation. You know, what else is there that you get, those fringe benefits that also help to balance, you know, what makes a happy employee. So we asked everyone, what are some of those practices? And I thought it was very interesting. Yes, employee assistance programs, and I think we've seen that really grow, especially since the pandemic, that organizations are really making that known and having those for employees to access mental health services or any other services that they may need. But we see really almost 70% with flexible work hours followed by, hybrid work environment, people telecommute more. So I think that's also really interesting for our sectors where we see most of our survey participants were from the nonprofit and the public sector, that they have these arrangements that really provide a different way of working that may be very something that's very attractive to us if you don't necessarily are receiving a higher level of pay than you wish you had. There might be some trade-offs that you're receiving that you may not get if you left your organization. So just something to think about, but I think we really have changed the way that we've worked. So we're going to probably see some of this leveling out that will start to feel like it is should be a standard give from organizations versus it's an outlier, right? It's a really huge benefit. And soon it'll start saying, I think we'll say, well, yeah, everyone does this now. So we'll kind of see how that trend continues. I know a lot of people are being called back to the office now, so we're going to see how that works in the near future. So just really quickly, and then we can kind of move into questions after if anyone has any. And if you do, feel free to drop them in the chat. I know Amy's going to monitor that for us as well, just to ping us. But part of this data is knowing what to do with it. So we wanted to provide it to you. And I think it's important to recognize that when we think about our careers, we typically look at it this way, not bumper to bumper traffic, but we really think about it as there's one way to go, right? And we inch along slowly going that direction. And this is the one way to get up to the level or the job title that we want. And so when we really should be thinking about it more along this line of thought, there are so many avenues today to get us to move closer to where we want to go. And it's not a straight shot. It's not a one way anymore. There's so many ways that you can develop your competencies. You can develop where you want to go. And it doesn't always even have to be internally at your own organization. So I know I gave an example before about, my role at the organization. I came in as a coordinator. So that was my entry point into my organization. And, I was going back to school. I had been at the organization for probably about 4 years. I really wanted to get into management. But I didn't have opportunities to supervise, staff. Of course, all of us pretty much supervise volunteers, or, I started supervising interns. I wanted to just get the experience, but I also wanted more leadership level experience, making those bigger decisions. And I just wasn't quite at that leadership level of my organization. So I looked elsewhere. I joined I was already part of my local association, the Dovia that was, in LA. And I asked, okay, well, how can I join the board? And the board president said, all you had to do was ask. And so I ended up joining the board and really learning a lot as a volunteer coordinator in my own role at an organization, but then serving as the board president of, large association. And so I was able to kind of really learn that and then take that knowledge and be able to advocate for myself in creating a managerial position. I think a lot of times we should also recognize that as we go up into these managerial roles, you may have to take on additional duties, additional departments. I was told there wasn't going to be a volunteer manager position, and I wanted to go into management. So in order to keep me, we talked about making a position in HR because HR needed support. And then I could merge the departments and really look at it from a totality of people resources. But I had to learn HR. Which I knew would be a good skill no matter what I did in the future. It's good to know that. So I said, sure. And I was able to continue to elevate the volunteer program the more that I grew in the organization. And now as a chief, I oversee a lot of different things. It's not just volunteer engagement. So there are going to be very transferable skills you're learning in volunteer engagement. It may not be the only thing that you do. So we know that organizations typically have to be nimble And you have to kind of wear those many hats, but making sure that volunteer engagement is still a large component of what you do. So thinking that way, you really want to think about those competencies and how can I grow the competency, because all of those can be transferable. I realized going into HR, I probably already knew about 60, 70% of the things I needed to know from my volunteer engagement role, because I was doing it already, working with volunteers. The only thing I really had to learn was more like comp and benefits and kind of some of the legalities, but otherwise, all the other skills I was very familiar with. So I think we really have to keep that in mind of all the ways that the skills that we're learning are transferable so we can grow our roles and may take on additional things, but also with volunteer engagement as the foundation. So one of the things we just wanted to provide in terms of career mapping, and this is just a really basic cycle of what you need to do in terms of when you think about your career and how you want to progress. And then there also is a career mapping worksheet that's also on our website in case you want to use that based on the information we provided in the job leveling document. But really thinking self-assessment, I'm sure you've taken maybe some behavioral assessments like the DISC or Profile XD or Strengths Finders or any of those things, but also just really evaluating where am I at? Where am I really strong? Where do I feel I need to continue to grow? You can use that job leveling document and the competencies that Kathy went over to say, okay, where am I really succeeding? And if I want to get to a director role, what do I need to learn? What do I need to grow in a bit more, get more experience, and really identify that for yourself, and then set some goals around how am I going to get there? And then it's really understanding that career pathway progression. How do I get through maybe these levels, or what gets me to the next level? Can I get that internally? Do I need to look externally? ALVE has so many resources that can help, like with the mentor program, or you want to do more public speaking, be in that leadership role, we have a presenters boot camp. All these things can help move you in the direction that you're looking to go. And then creating that development plan for yourself, setting those targets, milestones, and then again, constantly evaluating and adjusting. There may be another opportunity that opens. Maybe you always wanted to be, a director. And then I've seen individuals say, actually, maybe I want to be a consultant. Maybe I want to work for myself, maybe, and now I've changed that, but I'm still going to take everything I've learned. It still applies, but now maybe I want to do something a little different in terms of the pathway that I'm carving out for myself. So, just think about some of those things, what your long-term goals are, and what career paths are you really looking at in the future? Because there's so many ways to get to them, and so many things that you do can really be transferable. You just have to think about it in that way of how it can accommodate any of those pathways that you have identified for yourself. So I'm going to stop there. And I know Kathy can kind of wrap up, but are there any questions that anyone has?
We did have a question in a chat from Lisa. Is it a good idea when applying for nonprofit work to add your volunteer experience and describe the duties to help with entering the role?
Yes, absolutely. I think if you, and I want to make sure I understand the question. So it's around when you're looking for another role, or like a job, or maybe even a promotion, or whatever it may be. It is really good that you can speak to some of the intricacies of the work, because many of those things can be transferable. So when you think about, like say, if you wanted to say at your organization, the director position really is the face in the community. Like they're the ones going into doing all the presentations and, maybe talking to funders or whatever it may be. And you want that experience, but don't know how to get it. But maybe you've done that, like I said, like maybe at your local Dovia, or you found, you present at conferences or different things, and you want to be able to highlight some of that work to be able to say, while I haven't done it here at my organization, I've done it over here. And so I actually can do this skill. All I need is, just a learning curve on how we do it here. But, I'm comfortable doing that, etc. So you always want to highlight not only the things that you've done internally, but really look at all the ways you've done it, externally. It's okay to be creative. Like these are the ways that we learn and grow. And sometimes doing things externally outside of your organization, it feels a lot sometimes easier because it doesn't feel like there's a ton of high stakes happening. Because like at our organization, we were constantly thinking about like, oh, like I'm going to be judged on every single thing I do. And so when you do them a little more externally, you take a bit more risk. You put yourself out there a bit more in terms of how you develop. And so just maybe think of some of those ways too. And then you can apply that to any future position that you're looking for. So hopefully I answered that question. I don't know, Kathy, you have any other thoughts or ideas?
I also would say any volunteer work you do that you can show impact in that organization, you would want to put on your resume. You could even do a functional resume with your skills that you learned from that. Full disclosure, I was PTA president and we raised $60,000 and created a wetlands program and hired a naturalist. And I put that on my resume to show that I could do fundraising as well as leading a team to do that. So, especially since I had a break in employment, I was a stay-at-home mom for a while and then got back into it. So I definitely used the ways I was volunteering to help me get into a nonprofit organization. There was another question about, Megan, is there adjustment for inflation with salaries? And I think at the Points of Light conference, we talked a little bit about that, if you want to answer that one.
Yeah. So remember what we gave is a point in time. So, and he gave us, I think it was the May 2024 data. He waited till the last second to pull it for us. So that way I could have it as up to date as possible. But yes, you can. So again, anything is a point in time. So you can adjust for inflation off of this in the future. So, come 2025 or whatever, and it's 2% or whatever it is, 3%, 4%, 5% at this point, like you can adjust to that as well. Most of the time though, like you're going to be looking at how your organization does it as well. And typically they may have, COLA, cost of living adjustments, or they do a merit, or they do both, it really just depends. So, you can look at it from that perspective. So you can always add that to this salary information, but then your organization may not move that quickly for cost of living adjustment. So, it all depends. Compensation is, I feel like I'm an expert now, but I shouldn't say that. But spending so much time in it, it really does, it does matter a lot, because inflation can be different by metropolitan area, it can be different by state, or so there's so many factors that go into it. So you may want to understand how your organization looks at it, but at least this gives you a point in time reference for you to be able to use now.
There's another question in the chat from Hannah. Megan, what became your title when you advocated for a manager position that split your time between development and HR, overseeing people resources at your organization?
Yeah, I gave this example too because I thought I think it's funny. I don't know, but so when I moved into HR, I didn't want to be. The only time I ever had an HR title is when I was director of human resources. Otherwise, when I moved in as a manager, when I was finally promoted to a manager, I asked for, I think it was manager of talent management services, because I wanted to kind of have a little bit more of the talent in there, thinking, covered volunteers and employees. And then, when I came to becoming a chief, I sat with my CEO, and he said, oh, based on these things, like I see you as like a chief administration officer. And I, was like, do I look like a chief administration officer? And he said, no. So I said, that's right. I don't think so either. And I really see it as chief engagement officer because I thought engagement encompassed the volunteers, the staff. It was the feeling and the intention that I wanted behind my role. That I was engaging community, I was engaging employees. Like that to me was something that I really felt like connected to, that I could tell that story because I did not want to lose volunteer engagement. I did not want to be a chief human resources officer because that to me was a very private sector term. That was something that really me and if I was going that route, that would have made sense, you know, and but I'm from a public agency. I knew I'd always wanted to be here. And if someone else was doing this role, I would really see that being the titling. So again, there's not a lot of chief engagement officer roles that you can find, and many do different things. So again, you really look at it at that job leveling document to say it's at this level. And name it what you want to name it or what makes sense for your organization. I've always been really fortunate here to just be able to create my titles. And that's probably because I'm in HR now. So I get to have a little bit more control over that, but it's similar to the other folks in my organization too. Whatever makes sense for the organization, but it compares to what typical job you'll find. So that was kind of the impetus of creating and then I got to say I'm a CEO, but I throw a G in there. So I'm a CGO. So it doesn't get confused with my boss, who is the CEO.
I think we have time for one more question, and this one's from Angela. Is there anything we can do to help with the Department of Labor name ad?
Well, that's just a great segue to Kathy. So Kathy can talk about next steps.
Yes. So as it turned out, we have a committee at ALVE that is working on the narrative to answer the questions that are asked by the Department of Labor. And again, we're using this data to also help answer those questions. As it turned out, the comment period opened right when we were all at Points of Light conference. And it will be due, it closes August 12th. So we're meeting to do that narrative, and we are looking at what is the best way to voice our support for having our own occupation code. And so what we'd like to do is, I believe we have your emails at this point because you've joined this presentation. So two things I would say is once we're ready, we'd like to email you because you've attended this session on next steps for helping us support the getting our own occupation code with the Department of Labor. And that may be signing on to a letter that we have that we send as one body, or having sample templates of letters that you can also send in for support. The other thing I would say too is another way to keep up with this too is with our newsletter. And if you aren't currently an ALVE member, I'm going to put in a plug. I highly suggest you join. We're not expensive. It's $75 a year for membership, and we don't charge you for any other benefits you receive, which includes training and development. Like Megan said, we have a presenters boot camp that would assist you. We also have a mentoring program, and Megan does the matching on the mentor program, which can help you as you're trying to move up to different levels. We have over 20 communities of practice that you can participate in and learn from each other. And we have our service enterprise, which is a capacity building program that could help you in your organizations, to name a few. Just go on the website and take a look. But we'd love to send that information out to you when we're ready to have you either sign on to our letter or to actually go to your local association and have them promote that as well. And we will be posting that information both on our Facebook, newsletter, different social media platforms.
Okay, well, I think that's all the time that we have left. I will go back to my screen. We would love to get your feedback on our live academy today. We take your feedback and use it to pick our next topics for the live academies. We also just use that information to, give our presenters some feedback and ask questions as well. So here is the link on here for that Alive Academy evaluation. If you want to click into it, it just takes a couple of seconds. And like I said, we really appreciate that. We also want to thank Kathy and Megan. This is the second time you've given this presentation. It's such an important presentation. And we are so excited to add this bonus Alive Academy this month. So thank you both so much. Lots of things coming in. The comments, the chats. As Kathy said, we would love for you to join Alive. We do have an individual membership for $75. It is all inclusive. We also have an agency or local association membership for $125. We, with our focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, we also have a pay what you can membership. So we know that some organizations have very, very limited budgets. And so if you wanted to look at this and adding it to your organization, but know you have that restriction, we do have a pay what you can membership option as well. And for more information, please visit our volunteeralive.org website, and you can also email Gretchen, who is our administrative manager for Alive. But we thank you all so much for joining us today and hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.
Amy, can you drop the evaluation link into the chat?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you all.